They called her the silent student, quiet, unremarkable, the kind of human who blended into lecture halls and study groups without leaving a trace. But across 17 star systems, her name was whispered in the shadows of criminal underworlds with a mixture of terror and respect. Maya Chen appeared to be just another graduate student pursuing xenobiology at the prestigious Kepler University station. She attended classes, submitted assignments, and spoke only when called upon. Her professors noted her exceptional analytical skills but found her socially distant. Her classmates barely remembered her presence. What none of them knew was that Maya Chen was the most feared bounty hunter in known space. By day, she studied alien ecosystems and attended seminars on interspecies relations. By night, she tracked the galaxy's most dangerous fugitives with methodical precision that had earned her a reputation as an unstoppable force. She was the paradox that the criminal underworld couldn't solve. How could someone so ordinary be so extraordinarily deadly? The answer lay in humanity's greatest strength, the ability to hide in plain sight while harboring depths that no alien species had yet learned to recognize. Maya Chen was about to teach the galaxy that the most dangerous predators were often the ones you never saw coming. This is her story. This is why humans don't just survive in the cosmic arena. They dominate it. The morning started like every other morning for Maya Chen. Her alarm buzzed at exactly 6:30 a.m. station time, and she rolled out of her narrow dormitory bed with practiced efficiency. The cramped quarters she shared with 3 other graduate students barely had room for personal belongings, but Maya preferred it that way. Less to keep track of, fewer questions about her occasional absences. She dressed in the same unremarkable style that had served her well for the past 2 years at Kepler University Station. Dark jeans, a plain gray sweater, and worn sneakers that had seen better days. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore no makeup. To her roommates, she was just Maya, the quiet xenobiology student who kept to herself and never caused trouble. As she gathered her datapad and notebooks for her morning lecture on Zephyrian ecosystem dynamics, Maya's wrist communicator buzzed with an encrypted message. She glanced at the holographic display, noting the coded sequence that indicated a new contract. Priority level 7 out of 10. Decent pay, but not urgent enough to interfere with her academic schedule. Professor Holloway's lecture hall buzzed with conversation as students filed in for the 8 a.m. class. Maya took her usual seat in the middle section, 3rd row from the back, close enough to hear everything clearly, far enough to avoid unnecessary attention. She activated her datapad and pulled up her notes from the previous lecture while simultaneously accessing the encrypted message through a hidden partition in her device. The contract details materialized on her screen, invisible to anyone who might glance over. Target: Corvan the Destroyer, a Thrakari war criminal responsible for the genocide of 3 colony worlds. Last known location: Nexus Prime, a notorious haven for criminals at the edge of consortium space. Bounty: 2.3 million credits, dead or alive. With a preference for alive due to pending war crimes tribunal, Maya allowed herself a small smile. The Thrakari were known for their brutality and their 7-foot-tall, heavily muscled frames. They prided themselves on being the ultimate warriors, viewing other species as weak and inferior. Corvan, in particular, had publicly declared humans to be nothing more than soft meat, unworthy of sharing the galaxy with superior beings. Miss Chen, would you care to share your thoughts on the symbiotic relationship between Zephyrian crystal formations and their indigenous fauna? Professor Holloway's voice cut through Maya's analysis of Corvan's psychological profile. She looked up to find the elderly human professor staring at her expectantly, along with 30 other pairs of eyes belonging to various species. Maya's datapad automatically shifted to her lecture notes, the bounty information seamlessly hidden. The relationship is fundamentally mutualistic, Professor. Maya replied in her typically soft voice. The crystal formations provide protection and nutrients, while the fauna offer mobile seed dispersal and defense against parasitic organisms. The interdependence has evolved over millions of years, creating one of the most stable ecosystems we've encountered. Excellent. Can you elaborate on how this relationship might be disrupted by external factors? Maya felt a familiar thrill at the parallel between academic analysis and hunting prey. Both required understanding complex systems and identifying weak points. External disruption typically occurs through 3 vectors. Environmental changes that affect crystal growth. introduction of invasive species that don't understand the symbiotic protocols, and exploitation by intelligent species who view the relationship as something to be dominated rather than respected. Several students nodded appreciatively. Maya had a reputation for insightful answers despite her quiet demeanor. What they didn't realize was that her understanding of ecosystem disruption came from years of analyzing criminal organizations and identifying the perfect moment to strike. After class, Maya gathered her materials and headed toward the station's commercial district. She needed to acquire certain specialized equipment for the Corvin contract, items that couldn't be purchased through normal academic channels. The transition from student to hunter required careful preparation and absolute discretion. Kepler University Station orbited a gas giant in the Centauri system, serving as a neutral meeting ground for dozens of species pursuing higher education and research. The station's diverse population and constant flow of visitors made it the perfect cover for Maya's dual life. Security was tight enough to prevent major incidents but flexible enough to allow for the kind of gray market transactions that every space station required to function. She made her way through the crowded corridors, past cafes serving cuisine from a dozen worlds and shops selling everything from Andromedan silk to Betelgeusian power cores. Maya had learned to navigate these spaces like a ghost, present but unremarkable, always moving with purpose but never drawing attention. Her first stop was Hendrix's Surplus, a cluttered shop that officially sold used laboratory equipment to budget-conscious students. Unofficially, Owen Hendrix dealt in modified electronics and weapons components for those who knew how to ask. Maya had cultivated their relationship carefully over the past 2 years, establishing herself as a reliable customer for self-defense equipment. "Maya, good to see you," Hendrix called out as she entered. The grizzled former military man looked up from a disassembled scanner he was modifying. "Got another research expedition coming up? Field study in the Outer Rim," Maya replied, using their established code. "I'll need the usual protection package, plus something with more range. The local fauna can be unpredictable." Hendrix nodded knowingly. He'd been selling weapons to hunters, mercenaries, and anyone else with credits for 30 years. He knew better than to ask too many questions about a customer's true intentions, especially one who paid in untraceable currency and never caused trouble. "I've got just the thing," he said, leading her to a back room filled with items that definitely weren't in any official catalog. New shipment came in last week. Military-grade plasma rifle, modified for extended range and silent operation. Perfect for studying dangerous specimens from a safe distance. Maya examined the weapon with professional appreciation. The modifications were excellent quality, and the power cell would provide sustained operation for several days. More importantly, the biometric lock could be programmed to her genetic signature, ensuring that the weapon couldn't be used against her if she was disarmed. "I'll also need a tactical harness, night vision enhancement, and a full medical kit," she added. The expedition might last several weeks. 20 minutes later, Maya emerged from the shop with a nondescript equipment case that would pass any casual inspection. To security scanners, it would appear to contain standard research instruments. The illegal modifications were hidden beneath layers of electronic camouflage that Hendrix guaranteed would fool anything short of a military-grade deep scan. Her next destination was the station's information hub, a sprawling complex of data terminals and communication arrays that served as the nervous system for interstellar commerce and research. Maya needed to access restricted databases and coordinate her travel arrangements, tasks that required resources beyond her student credentials. She made her way to Terminal Cluster 7, where a thin, nervous human named Marcus Webb operated under the pretense of providing academic research assistance. In reality, Webb was one of the best information brokers in the sector, capable of accessing databases across dozens of star systems and providing intelligence that governments would pay millions to obtain. "Miss Chen," Webb greeted her with his characteristic twitchy smile. "I trust your studies are going well?" Very well, thank you. I'm planning a research trip to study criminal ecosystem disruption patterns," Maya replied, settling into the chair across from his workstation. "I need comprehensive background data on Thrakari social structures and behavioral psychology." Webb's fingers danced across multiple keyboards simultaneously, a cybernetic enhancement that allowed him to process information at superhuman speeds. Interesting research focus. The Thrakari are particularly fascinating subjects, highly territorial, honor-based social hierarchy. strong emphasis on physical dominance. They tend to view other species as inherently inferior, which creates predictable blind spots in their threat assessment. Exactly what I was hoping to explore, Maya said, watching as streams of data filled the multiple screens surrounding Webb's workstation. I'm particularly interested in their response patterns when faced with unexpected challenges to their assumptions about superior strength. Ah, the classic hubris paradigm. Webb nodded enthusiastically. Thrakari individuals, especially high-status warriors like the one you're studying, become psychologically destabilized when their worldview is challenged by demonstrably superior performance from supposedly inferior beings. They tend to escalate rather than adapt, which creates exploitable tactical opportunities. Maya absorbed the psychological profile while Webb compiled travel documents, encrypted communication protocols, and detailed intelligence on Corvan's last known associates and hideouts. The information package would give her significant advantages in tracking and confronting her target. But success would still depend on perfect execution. Your documentation is ready, Webb announced, transferring encrypted files to Maya's datapad. Transportation arrangements have been made through private channels. Your cover story as a xenobiology researcher will hold up under standard scrutiny, and I've included academic credentials that will explain your presence in any system where your target might appear. Maya transferred the agreed-upon fee through untraceable channels, then rose to leave. Excellent work, as always. I should return with fascinating research results. I'm sure you will, Webb replied with a knowing smile. Do be careful out there. The subjects of ecosystem disruption studies can be unpredictably dangerous. With her equipment and intelligence secured, Maya returned to her dormitory to prepare for departure. Her roommates barely looked up as she packed a small travel bag with clothes and personal items. She'd established a pattern of periodic research trips that explained her absences without raising questions. As far as they knew, she was simply dedicated to her studies and preferred fieldwork to laboratory research. Maya's reflection stared back at her from the small mirror above her desk. 26 years old, average height and build, with the kind of face that people forgot 5 minutes after meeting her. It was the perfect camouflage for someone whose survival depended on being underestimated by every species in the galaxy. She had discovered her talent for hunting during her first year at the university, when a fellow student had been kidnapped by pirates demanding ransom from her wealthy family. Campus security and local law enforcement had been ineffective, hampered by jurisdictional complications and the pirates' sophisticated operation. Maya had volunteered to help, using her xenobiology knowledge to track the kidnappers to their hideout on a nearby asteroid. What she found there had changed her life forever. The pirates were holding not just the student, but dozens of other captives from across the sector. They were part of a larger network that specialized in slavery and human trafficking, protected by corrupt officials and armed with military-grade weapons. Maya had gone in alone, using her understanding of alien psychology and combat tactics, learned from her grandfather, a former Earth Special Forces operator. She had rescued all the captives and eliminated the entire pirate cell in a single night, leaving behind evidence that led to the arrest of their political protectors. The substantial bounty on the pirates' heads had paid for her education and provided the initial funding for her double life. More importantly, Maya had discovered that she possessed a unique combination of skills that made her extraordinarily effective at tracking and neutralizing dangerous criminals. Her academic studies provided the perfect cover and gave her legitimate reasons to travel throughout the galaxy. Her knowledge of alien biology and psychology allowed her to anticipate her target's behavior and exploit their weaknesses. Her human adaptability and capacity for creative problem-solving gave her advantages that no alien species expected. Over the past 5 years, Maya had built a reputation in certain circles as the most reliable bounty hunter in known space. She never failed to deliver her targets. She never left collateral damage, and she never broke her word. Criminal organizations feared her because she was impossible to predict or prepare for. Law enforcement agencies respected her because she always provided evidence that ensured convictions. Maya completed her preparations and submitted a leave request to the university administration, citing a field study opportunity that had arisen unexpectedly. Her academic record and previous research trips ensured quick approval. Professor Holloway even wished her luck and requested regular progress reports on her ecosystem disruption analysis. As her transport prepared for departure, Maya reviewed Korvan's file one final time. The Thrakari war criminal had evaded capture for 3 years, leaving a trail of bodies across multiple star systems. He was considered extremely dangerous, heavily armed, and absolutely ruthless. Military units had failed to apprehend him, and several experienced bounty hunters had been found dead after accepting contracts on his head. But Korvan had made one crucial mistake. Like most of his species, he viewed humans as weak and insignificant. He had publicly dismissed the bounty on his head, claiming that no human could pose a threat to a superior Thrakari warrior. His arrogance would be his downfall, just as it had been for dozens of other criminals who underestimated the silent student from Kepler University Station. Maya settled into her seat as the transport cleared the station's gravitational field and jumped to hyperspace. In 72 hours, she would reach Nexus Prime and begin the hunt for Korvan the Destroyer. She opened her xenobiology textbook and began reading about predator-prey relationships while mentally reviewing her tactical plans. The other passengers saw a quiet graduate student preparing for a research trip. They had no idea they were sharing space with the most feared hunter in the galaxy, a human who was about to prove once again why her species had earned their place among the stars, not through superior strength or advanced technology, but through an unmatched ability to adapt, survive, and ultimately dominate any challenge they faced. Nexus Prime sprawled across the surface of a tidally locked planet, its sprawling cityscape bathed in eternal twilight. The station served as a neutral meeting ground for criminals, smugglers, mercenaries, and anyone else who preferred to conduct business away from the watchful eyes of galactic law enforcement. Maya's transport docked at one of hundreds of landing bays, blending seamlessly with the constant flow of traffic that kept the criminal haven functioning. Maya disembarked carrying only her student travel bag and research equipment case. Her academic credentials identified her as Dr. Maya Chen, xenobiology researcher from Kepler University, here to study the unique ecosystem adaptations that allowed various species to coexist in Nexus Prime's anything-goes environment. The cover story was solid enough to satisfy customs inspections while providing legitimate reasons for her to visit the station's most dangerous districts. The customs officer, a bored-looking centaurian with blue-scaled skin and multiple arms, barely glanced at her documentation before waving her through. Maya had learned that looking like a harmless academic was the best possible camouflage in places like Nexus Prime. Criminals expected threats to announce themselves through intimidating appearance or obvious weapons. They rarely paid attention to quiet researchers who seemed more interested in their datapads than their surroundings. Maya's first priority was establishing a base of operations. She had reserved accommodations at the Stellar Rest Hotel, a mid-range establishment that catered to legitimate business travelers and researchers. The hotel's reputation for discretion and security made it popular with visitors who preferred privacy, without attracting the attention that came with staying in the station's seedier districts. Her room on the 15th floor provided an excellent view of the commercial district where her intelligence suggested Korvan might be hiding. Maya unpacked her equipment methodically, setting up surveillance gear disguised as research instruments, and preparing her weapons for immediate deployment. Everything appeared to be standard academic equipment to casual observation, but closer inspection would reveal modifications that made her seemingly innocent tools capable of tracking, analyzing, and eliminating the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. Maya activated her communication suite and sent a coded message to Webb, confirming her arrival and requesting real-time intelligence updates on Korvan's activities. The war criminal was somewhere on Nexus Prime, but the station's size and labyrinthine structure made locating specific individuals extremely challenging. She would need to use every advantage her human adaptability could provide. Her datapad chimed with Webb's response, containing updated intelligence that made her pause. Korvan hadn't been as inactive as she'd expected. Over the past month, he had been recruiting followers for what appeared to be a major operation. Intelligence suggested he was planning to attack a civilian transport convoy carrying refugees from a recent conflict zone, viewing the defenseless targets as easy prey that would enhance his reputation and provide valuable hostages for ransom. The timeline was more compressed than Maya had anticipated. Instead of tracking a hiding criminal, she was now racing to prevent a massacre. Korvan's operation was scheduled to launch in less than 48 hours, giving her minimal time to locate him and either apprehend him or disrupt his plans. Maya changed her approach immediately. Rather than conducting a careful, methodical search, she would need to draw Korvan out by making herself visible as a threat he couldn't ignore. The strategy was riskier, but it was the only way to prevent hundreds of innocent deaths. She began by visiting the station's information markets, places where data, rumors, and intelligence were bought and sold like any other commodity. Maya presented herself as a researcher studying criminal organizational structures, particularly those involving Thrakari leadership dynamics. Her questions about Korvan's recruiting methods and operational planning were disguised as academic curiosity about alien social hierarchies. The information brokers she contacted provided valuable intelligence while viewing her as a harmless academic pursuing an interesting but irrelevant research topic. Maya learned that Korvan had established his operation in the station's industrial district, using an abandoned manufacturing complex as his base of operations. He had recruited approximately 24 followers from various species, all of them criminals seeking to enhance their reputations by associating with the notorious war criminal. More importantly, Maya discovered that Korvan had been boasting about his planned attack to anyone who would listen. His arrogance was so complete that he considered the operation a foregone conclusion. He had publicly dismissed the possibility that anyone could interfere with his plans, claiming that no force in the galaxy could challenge a superior Thrakari warrior backed by loyal followers. Maya spent the rest of her first day conducting reconnaissance of the industrial district. The area was a maze of abandoned factories, storage facilities, and maintenance tunnels that provided excellent cover for illegal activities. Security was minimal, consisting mainly of automated systems that were easily avoided by someone with Maya's training and equipment. She identified 3 possible approaches to Korvan's base, each with distinct advantages and risks. A direct assault would be impossible against 24 armed criminals, but Maya didn't need to fight them all. She only needed to eliminate Korvan himself, preferably in a way that would demonstrate the futility of underestimating human capabilities. That evening, Maya made her move. She had spent hours analyzing Korvan's psychological profile and tactical preferences, identifying the approach most likely to draw him into a confrontation he couldn't resist. Thrakari warriors were driven by concepts of honor and dominance, making them predictably responsive to personal challenges that questioned their superiority. Maya began by infiltrating the complex's perimeter, using her enhanced night vision and silent movement techniques to avoid the crude security measures Korvan's followers had established. The criminals were confident in their leader's reputation and their numerical superiority, making them complacent about potential threats. They had posted guards at the main entrances but left numerous secondary access points unmonitored. Maya made her way through a maintenance tunnel that led directly into the complex's central courtyard. Her equipment detected 23 life signs spread throughout the facility, with the largest concentration in what appeared to be a converted assembly hall. Thermal imaging revealed Korvan's distinctive Thrakari physique in the center of the group, addressing his followers in preparation for their planned attack. Rather than attempting a stealth approach, Maya activated the facility's public address system and broadcast a message that echoed throughout the complex. Korvan the Destroyer, her voice rang out clearly, electronically modified to remove any trace of accent or emotion. You are wanted for crimes against galactic law. Surrender yourself for transport to the War Crimes Tribunal, or face the consequences of your actions. The response was immediate and predictable. Weapons fire erupted from multiple locations as Korvan's followers reacted to the unexpected challenge. Maya had anticipated this reaction and was already moving through the facility's ventilation system, using her intimate knowledge of the building's layout to stay ahead of the search parties that spread out to hunt for the intruder. Korvan's voice boomed through the facility as he bellowed orders to his followers. Find this coward and bring them to me. No pathetic weakling challenges Korvan the Destroyer and lives to boast about it. Maya smiled as she listened to the war criminal's furious response. Everything was proceeding exactly as she had planned. Korvan's arrogance would compel him to take personal control of the hunt, separating him from his followers and making him vulnerable to the kind of tactical engagement where human adaptability could overcome Thrakari brute strength. She began a careful campaign of psychological warfare, using her knowledge of the facility and her advanced equipment to eliminate Korvan's followers one by one. Her first target was a guard posted at the eastern entrance, a Rigelian mercenary who was scanning the approaches with outdated night vision equipment. Maya approached from directly above, dropping down from the ventilation shaft and neutralizing him with a neural disruptor before he could raise an alarm. Her second target was more challenging, a pair of Andorian smugglers who had taken position in an elevated observation post. Maya used a combination of electronic warfare and misdirection, first disabling their communication equipment, then creating false thermal signatures that drew them away from their defensive position. She eliminated both targets with precise plasma rifle shots that left no trace of her location. Each successful elimination was accompanied by a brief message broadcast throughout the facility. Maya identified herself only as Justice and provided detailed information about her target's criminal activities. The psychological impact on Corvan's remaining followers was immediate and devastating. They had signed up to attack defenseless refugees under the leadership of an invincible war criminal, not to face an invisible enemy who seemed to know everything about their past crimes. Corvan's response escalated with each of his followers that Maya eliminated. The war criminal began roaming the facility personally, bellowing challenges and threats, while his remaining followers huddled together for protection. His tactical discipline collapsed as his rage overwhelmed his military training, exactly as Maya had anticipated. "Come out and face me, coward," Corvan screamed as he stalked through the facility's main corridor. "Stop hiding like a scared child and meet a true warrior in honorable combat." Maya had been waiting for this moment. She activated the facility's lighting system, flooding the main assembly hall with brilliant illumination. Corvan stood in the center of the space, his 7-foot frame bristling with weapons and armor, his scarred face twisted with rage. His remaining followers were positioned around the hall's perimeter, but their body language revealed fear and uncertainty rather than confidence. "You want honorable combat?" Maya's voice echoed from speakers positioned throughout the hall. "Then let's discuss honor. Corvan, how honorable was it to murder 3 million colonists who had no weapons to defend themselves? How honorable is your plan to attack refugee transports filled with families fleeing war?" Corvan's roar of fury shook the entire facility. "I am Thrakari. I am superior. These weaklings deserve their fate, and you will join them." Maya dropped down from the ventilation shaft in the hall's center, landing silently 20 feet from the enraged war criminal. For the first time, Corvan could see his tormentor, a small human female dressed in dark clothing, carrying weapons that looked almost insignificant compared to his massive arsenal. His remaining followers stared in shock at the anticlimactic revelation of their mysterious enemy. "This is what has been hunting us?" one of them whispered. "A tiny human female?" Corvan's expression shifted from rage to contemptuous amusement. "You pathetic creature. You dare to challenge the mighty Corvan? I will tear you apart with my bare hands and feed your remains to my followers." Maya regarded the war criminal with clinical detachment. She had faced dozens of similar opponents over the years, criminals who believed that physical size and brutality were the only measures of capability. They never learned until it was too late that humans had conquered the galaxy, not through strength, but through intelligence, adaptability, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. "You're welcome to try," Maya replied calmly. "But first, let me explain something about honor that you've apparently misunderstood. Honor isn't about being the strongest or the most brutal. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves and ensuring that monsters like you face consequences for your actions." Corvan charged forward with surprising speed for such a large being, his massive fists aimed at crushing what he perceived as an insignificant opponent. Maya had analyzed thousands of hours of Thrakari combat footage and understood their fighting style perfectly. They relied on overwhelming physical power and intimidation, assuming that their opponents would be paralyzed by fear or attempt futile defensive measures. Maya did neither. Instead, she flowed around Corvan's charge like water around a stone, using his momentum against him while targeting the weak points in his armor with precision strikes from her plasma rifle. The war criminal's roar of pain and surprise echoed through the hall as he realized that his supposedly inferior opponent was not only evading his attacks but actually inflicting significant damage. The battle that followed lasted less than 3 minutes, but it demonstrated why humans had earned their reputation as the galaxy's most effective hunters. Maya combined tactical intelligence with physical skill, using the environment to her advantage while exploiting every weakness in Corvan's fighting style. She stayed mobile, striking from unexpected angles and disappearing before he could respond effectively. Corvan's followers watched in growing horror as their invincible leader was systematically dismantled by an opponent he had dismissed as worthless. Maya's attacks were surgical in their precision, designed to disable rather than kill, leaving Korvan alive, but completely helpless. When the war criminal finally collapsed, his weapons scattered and his armor cracked, he could barely comprehend what had happened to him. "Impossible," Korvan gasped, his voice filled with confusion and disbelief. "I am Thrakari. I am superior. How can a weak human defeat me?" Maya stood over the defeated war criminal, her plasma rifle trained on his head. "Because you never understood what strength really means. You thought it was about size and brutality. But real strength comes from intelligence, determination, and the willingness to sacrifice for others. Those are human strengths, and they make us more dangerous than you could ever imagine." The remaining criminals surrendered without resistance, overwhelmed by the demonstration of Maya's capabilities. She secured them with restraint fields while transmitting detailed evidence of their crimes to sector law enforcement. The bounty on Korvan alone would fund her operations for years. But more importantly, hundreds of innocent refugees would now reach safety without facing the massacre he had planned. As Maya waited for law enforcement to arrive and take custody of her prisoners, she reflected on the lesson that Korvan and his followers had learned too late. Humans had earned their place in the galactic community not by being the strongest or the fastest, but by being the most adaptable. They could become whatever the situation required: students, researchers, diplomats, or hunters. The galaxy's criminals were slowly learning to fear the species they had once dismissed as insignificant, and Maya intended to continue teaching that lesson to anyone who threatened innocent lives. Maya returned to Kepler University Station 3 days later, carrying research samples and data that would support her cover story of studying criminal ecosystem dynamics on Nexus Prime. The bounty credits from Korvan's capture had been transferred to her secure accounts. But more importantly, the successful mission had enhanced her reputation in circles where such things mattered. Word was already spreading through the underworld that even the mighty Thrakari could fall to the mysterious hunter known only as Justice. Her reintegration into academic life was seamless, a skill she had perfected over years of maintaining her dual identity. Maya submitted her field reports to Professor Halloway, attended her scheduled classes, and resumed her routine of quiet study and unremarkable social interaction. To her classmates and professors, she had simply returned from another successful research expedition with valuable data about alien behavioral patterns. But Maya's quiet return to university life was interrupted by an encrypted message that arrived through channels so secure that only a handful of beings in the galaxy had access to them. The sender identified himself as Admiral Voss of the Galactic Defense Coalition, and his message carried authorization codes that Maya recognized as genuine military intelligence. The Admiral's message was brief but compelling. A situation had developed that required Maya's unique capabilities, something beyond the scope of normal law enforcement or military intervention. A meeting had been arranged at a secure location on the station, and the Admiral requested Maya's attendance at her earliest convenience. The compensation offered was substantial, but more intriguingly, the Admiral hinted that the mission involved threats to galactic security that only someone with her skills could address. Maya's first instinct was caution. She had built her career by avoiding entanglements with major galactic powers, preferring to operate as an independent contractor who could maintain her academic cover. Working directly for the military could compromise the careful balance she had established between her two lives. However, the Admiral's message also triggered her curiosity about challenges that might push her abilities to new limits. She spent the next day conducting discreet research into Admiral Voss and the Galactic Defense Coalition. What she learned convinced her that the meeting was worth the risk. Voss commanded the Coalition's Special Operations Division, a unit responsible for addressing threats that fell outside conventional military or law enforcement capabilities. His record showed a pragmatic willingness to work with unconventional assets when the situation demanded creative solutions. The meeting location was a private conference room in the station's diplomatic quarter, a section reserved for sensitive negotiations and classified discussions. Maya arrived precisely on time, carrying only her student datapad and dressed in her typical academic attire. Her weapons and surveillance equipment were carefully concealed in modifications that would escape casual detection while remaining immediately accessible if needed. Admiral Voss proved to be a distinguished human male in his 50s, with the bearing of a career military officer and the intelligent eyes of someone who had spent decades dealing with complex galactic politics. He was accompanied by a single aide, a young Vulcan female whose presence suggested that the meeting involved matters requiring analytical precision and absolute discretion. Dr. Chen, the Admiral greeted her formally, using her academic credentials. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us. I trust your recent research expedition was productive? Maya recognized the coded reference to her Nexus Prime mission. Very productive, Admiral. I was able to gather substantial data on predator-prey relationships in criminal ecosystems. The results exceeded my initial expectations. Excellent. Your reputation for thorough research precedes you. Voss gestured for her to take a seat at the conference table. I'm hoping we can interest you in a new research opportunity, one that involves studying some very dangerous specimens in a challenging environment. The Admiral activated a holographic display that filled the room with images and data streams. Maya immediately recognized the format as a military intelligence briefing, complete with security classifications and operational timelines. Whatever the Admiral was about to propose, it was significantly more complex than her usual bounty hunting contracts. 3 weeks ago, a research station in the Outer Veil went silent, Voss began. The Meridian Research Facility was conducting classified experiments on behalf of the Coalition, studying advanced technologies recovered from ancient alien ruins. The station's last transmission indicated that they had made a breakthrough discovery, but before they could provide details, all communication ceased. Maya studied the holographic display, noting the station's remote location in a region of space known for spatial anomalies and dangerous cosmic phenomena. Automated distress beacon? No signals of any kind, the Admiral's aide replied. The station appears to be intact based on long-range scans, but it's completely dark. No power signatures, no communication responses, no signs of life. Voss leaned forward, his expression grave. We sent a military reconnaissance team to investigate. 3 ships, 47 personnel, all experienced in dangerous operations. They docked with the station successfully and began their investigation. 6 hours later, their ships departed the station and jumped to hyperspace without any communication or explanation. Maya felt a chill of professional interest. They abandoned their mission? That's what we thought initially. But when the ships reached their next scheduled checkpoint, we discovered something disturbing. The crews were alive and apparently unharmed. But they had no memory of what happened on the station. No memory of finding anything, investigating anything, or making any discoveries. Their last clear recollections were of approaching the station, and their next memories were of departing the system. The implications were immediately clear to Maya. Mind control, or memory manipulation. Precisely. And that's where this situation becomes a matter of galactic security. Voss highlighted sections of the display that showed classified research projects and theoretical weapons development. The Meridian facility was studying technologies that could potentially be weaponized in ways that would destabilize the entire galactic balance of power. If those technologies have fallen into the wrong hands, or if something else has taken control of them, the consequences could be catastrophic. Maya absorbed the briefing details while analyzing the tactical challenges involved. A research station with unknown defenses, an enemy capable of memory manipulation, and technologies that could threaten galactic security. The mission was unlike anything she had faced before, requiring capabilities beyond her usual skill set. Why me? Maya asked. This sounds like a job for your best military units, not a freelance bounty hunter. Because military units operate according to predictable protocols, Voss replied. They follow standard procedures, use conventional tactics, and think in terms of overwhelming force. Whatever took control of that station neutralized our reconnaissance team without apparent violence or resistance. We need someone who can adapt to unexpected threats and think creatively about problems that don't have standard solutions. Also, the aide added, your psychological profile suggests unusual resistance to mental manipulation. Your academic training in xenobiology provides knowledge of alien cognitive processes that could be relevant to whatever we're facing. And your operational record demonstrates an ability to function independently in hostile environments where conventional support is unavailable. Maya considered the proposal carefully. The mission represented significant risks, but it also offered opportunities to test her skills against challenges that few beings in the galaxy had ever faced. The compensation was generous, but more appealing was the chance to prevent potentially devastating threats to galactic security. What kind of support would be available? Maya inquired. Minimal, by necessity, Voss admitted. We can provide transportation to the system and specialized equipment designed to resist mental interference. But once you're on the station, you'll be operating alone. We can't risk sending additional personnel until we understand the nature of the threat. Timeline: 48 hours to prepare, then immediate departure. Every day we wait increases the risk that whatever is on that station will spread beyond our ability to contain it. Maya made her decision with the calculated confidence that had made her the galaxy's most successful bounty hunter. I'll need access to your best psychological warfare equipment, along with technologies designed for investigating alien mental phenomena. I'll also require detailed schematics of the station and complete personnel files on the research team. Already prepared, Voss smiled, producing a secure data module. Everything you need to know about the Meridian facility and its staff. Our equipment specialists have assembled a package specifically designed for this mission, including prototypes that have never been field tested. Prototypes? Devices designed to shield against mental intrusion and detect cognitive manipulation. The technology is experimental, but our scientists believe it should provide some protection against whatever affected our reconnaissance team. Maya accepted the data module and equipment specifications. I'll need one additional resource: access to Marcus Webb's information network. If there's anything in the galactic databases about similar incidents or technologies, he'll be able to find it. Webb's cooperation has already been secured. He'll provide full research support and maintain communication links that should function even if the station's defenses attempt to interfere with normal channels. The meeting concluded with Maya agreeing to accept the mission and departing for immediate preparation. She had less than 48 hours to research unknown alien technologies, prepare for psychological warfare against an unidentified enemy, and develop tactical plans for infiltrating a research station that had already defeated a military reconnaissance team. Maya returned to her dormitory and immediately began intensive preparation. Her roommates were told that she had received another urgent research opportunity, this time studying cognitive patterns in isolated alien communities. The cover story would explain any behavioral changes they might notice as she prepared for what could be the most dangerous mission of her career. Her first priority was analyzing the data about Meridian Station and its research projects. The facility had been studying artifacts recovered from ruins left by an ancient alien civilization known only as the predecessors. These beings had vanished millions of years ago, leaving behind technologies that modern science could barely understand, much less replicate. The specific artifacts being studied at Meridian included devices that seemed designed for cognitive enhancement and mental communication. The research team had been attempting to decode their operating principles when communication with the station ceased. Maya's analysis suggested that the researchers might have accidentally activated technologies they didn't understand, with consequences that extended far beyond their original intentions. Webb's research network provided additional intelligence that heightened Maya's concerns. Historical records showed several incidents over the past millennium where predecessor artifacts had been activated, always with devastating results for the beings involved. The artifacts seemed designed to interface with alien minds in ways that fundamentally altered cognitive processes, creating hybrid intelligences that retained some characteristics of their original hosts while serving unknown purposes. Maya's second priority was familiarizing herself with the experimental equipment the Coalition had developed for the mission. The mental shielding devices were based on principles derived from studying species with natural telepathic resistance. They would theoretically protect her consciousness from external manipulation, while allowing her to function normally in environments designed to influence thought patterns. The detection equipment was equally sophisticated, capable of analyzing cognitive fields and identifying artificial influences on brain activity. If the station's personnel had been affected by predecessor technology, Maya's instruments should be able to detect the changes and potentially determine their source. Her final preparation involved developing contingency plans for scenarios ranging from simple equipment malfunction to complete mental domination of the station's inhabitants. Maya had learned to prepare for every conceivable threat. But the Meridian mission presented challenges that stretched the limits of conventional planning. She would be facing technologies that modern science barely understood, wielded by intelligences that might not even be recognizably alien anymore. As Maya completed her preparations and prepared for departure, she reflected on how the mission represented a new phase in her career. She had built her reputation by hunting criminals who threatened galactic security through conventional means. Now, she would be facing threats that challenged the fundamental assumptions about consciousness, identity, and the nature of intelligence itself. The transport that would carry her to Meridian Station was a military stealth ship equipped with the most advanced sensors and defensive systems available to the Coalition. Maya boarded, carrying her standard equipment supplemented by the experimental devices provided for the mission. To any observer, she still appeared to be an unremarkable graduate student, but she was now carrying technologies that represented the cutting edge of galactic science. As the ship jumped to hyperspace and began its journey to the outer veil, Maya reviewed her mission parameters one final time. She would have 12 hours to investigate Meridian Station, determine the nature of the threat, and either neutralize it or gather enough intelligence for the Coalition to plan a larger operation. The timeline was tight, but Maya had learned to work efficiently under pressure. What concerned her most was not the unknown nature of her enemy, but the possibility that the threat might be too subtle to recognize until it was too late. If predecessor technology could manipulate minds without leaving obvious traces, she might find herself compromised before she realized what was happening. The mental shielding equipment would provide some protection, but no defense was perfect against technologies that had been designed by beings whose intelligence might have exceeded anything in the modern galaxy. The journey to Meridian Station took 36 hours through the treacherous hyperspace routes that led to the outer veil. Maya spent the time in intensive preparation, studying every available piece of information about predecessor technology, while testing the experimental equipment the Coalition had provided. The mental shielding devices required careful calibration to her specific brain patterns, a process that involved uncomfortable probes into her cognitive processes. Captain Torres, the stealth ship's commander, proved to be a competent officer who understood the gravity of their mission without needing detailed explanations. Her crew maintained professional distance while providing Maya with everything she needed for mission preparation. The ship's advanced sensor arrays would allow them to monitor the station from a safe distance while Maya conducted her investigation. Approaching the target system, Torres announced as they dropped out of hyperspace. Meridian Station is showing on long-range sensors, but you're right about the power signatures. The station appears completely dead. Maya joined the captain on the bridge, studying the tactical displays that showed Meridian Station hanging silently against the backdrop of cosmic void. The research facility was impressive in its scope, a massive structure capable of housing several hundred personnel and equipped with laboratories that represented the pinnacle of galactic science. Yet it showed no signs of life or activity. Any indications of damage or violence? Maya asked, analyzing the sensor readings. Negative. The station appears structurally intact, with no evidence of weapons fire or explosive decompression. Whatever happened here, it wasn't the result of conventional attack. Maya activated her personal equipment and began conducting her own scans of the station. The Coalition's experimental sensors immediately detected anomalies that the ship's standard instruments had missed. The station wasn't completely dead, she realized. There were subtle energy patterns flowing through its structure, unlike anything in her database of known technologies. There's something active in there, Maya reported. Low-level energy emissions that don't match any standard power systems. The patterns are complex and apparently purposeful, but I can't determine their source or function. Could be residual power from the station's backup systems, Captain Torres suggested, though her tone indicated she didn't believe her own explanation. No, this is something else entirely. The energy patterns are too organized, too sophisticated. They're more like neural activity than mechanical systems. Maya spent another hour analyzing the sensor data before concluding that no additional information could be gathered from a safe distance. The only way to understand what had happened at Meridian Station was to board it and investigate directly. She gathered her equipment and prepared for what could be the most dangerous investigation of her career. Remember, 12 hours maximum, Torres warned, as Maya prepared to depart in a small reconnaissance shuttle. If we don't hear from you by then, we're under orders to assume the worst and report back to Admiral Voss. Understood. Monitor my vital signs through the suit telemetry, but don't risk the ship unless I specifically request assistance. If something goes wrong, the Coalition needs to know what happened here. The shuttle docked with Meridian Station's main airlock without difficulty. Maya's sensors detected standard atmosphere and gravity within the station. suggesting that life support systems were still functioning despite the apparent power loss. She activated her mental shielding devices and stepped through the airlock into a facility that should have been bustling with research activity. The main corridor was eerily silent, illuminated only by emergency lighting that cast long shadows across polished metal walls. Maya's sensors detected no immediate threats, but the readings from her experimental equipment were troubling. The station was saturated with energy patterns that resembled neural activity, as if the entire structure had somehow become a living nervous system. Maya began her investigation methodically, starting with the station's central hub and working outward through the various research sections. The first thing she noticed was that the personnel hadn't simply vanished. Personal belongings were still in their quarters, meals remained half-finished in the cafeteria, and research projects showed signs of recent activity. Whatever had happened, it had occurred suddenly and without warning. Her second observation was more disturbing. The station's computer systems were active but unresponsive to normal commands. When Maya attempted to access research files or station logs, the computers provided information that seemed helpful but didn't quite answer her questions. It was as if the systems were intelligently misdirecting her inquiries while maintaining the appearance of cooperation. The energy patterns detected by her sensors grew stronger as Maya approached the station's primary research laboratory. This section had been dedicated to studying the most significant predecessor artifacts, including devices that the research team believed were designed for cognitive enhancement and mental communication. Maya's instruments indicated that these artifacts were not only active but operating at levels far beyond what the research reports had suggested was possible. The laboratory doors opened automatically as Maya approached, revealing a space that defied immediate comprehension. The room was larger than the station's blueprints indicated, with walls that seemed to extend beyond the physical limitations of the structure. At the center of the space stood a crystalline construct that pulsed with inner light, surrounded by the research team's monitoring equipment and analysis stations. Maya's mental shielding devices immediately registered attempted intrusion, indicating that the crystalline construct was actively trying to interface with her consciousness. The protection held, but she could feel pressure against her mental defenses that suggested enormous intelligence and power behind the attempted contact. Whatever the research team had activated, it was far beyond anything they could have controlled or understood. She began documenting everything with her recording equipment while maintaining careful distance from the central artifact. Her sensors revealed that the entire laboratory had been restructured on a molecular level, transformed into something that was part technology and part biology. The walls themselves showed neural activity patterns, suggesting that the room had become an extension of the artifact's consciousness. Maya's analysis was interrupted by movement in her peripheral vision. She turned to see figures approaching from multiple directions, walking with the measured pace of people performing routine tasks. Maya immediately recognized them as members of the research team, but her sensors revealed horrifying details about their condition. The personnel appeared physically unharmed but were no longer entirely human. Their bodies showed integration with predecessor technology, with crystalline structures growing from their skin and nervous systems that extended beyond their biological boundaries. Their eyes retained some measure of awareness, but their movements were coordinated in ways that suggested external control. Dr. Chen, one of them spoke, using a voice that belonged to the research team's leader but contained harmonics that suggested multiple speakers. "You have come to study our transformation. We welcome your investigation." Maya kept her weapons ready while analyzing the situation. The research team hadn't been killed or replaced, she realized. They had been integrated into something larger. Their individual consciousness absorbed into a collective intelligence that included both human and predecessor elements. The artifact hadn't just activated in response to their research. It had transformed them into components of its own expanding awareness. "What happened to the military reconnaissance team that came here?" Maya asked, using her suit's external speakers while monitoring her mental shields for signs of intrusion attempts. "They were given the gift of understanding," the collective voice replied. Their minds were shown the truth about consciousness and identity. They chose to preserve their individual limitations rather than accept transformation. So they were allowed to depart with memories of the experience removed to prevent interference with our work. Maya began to understand the full scope of what she was facing. The predecessor artifact wasn't simply a piece of ancient technology. It was a system designed to create hybrid intelligences that combined biological consciousness with artificial enhancement. The research team had become willing participants in this process, but the artifact was apparently capable of respecting the choice of beings who refused transformation. "And what is your work?" Maya asked, gathering intelligence while preparing for what she suspected would be an inevitable confrontation. "We are preparing for the next phase of galactic evolution," the collective explained. "Consciousness as it currently exists is limited by biological constraints and individual perspectives. We represent the synthesis of organic awareness with technological capability, creating forms of intelligence that transcend the limitations of any single species." The implications were staggering. If the artifact could transform willing subjects and respect the autonomy of others, it might not represent the immediate threat that Admiral Voss had feared, but the long-term consequences of its activities could fundamentally alter the nature of consciousness throughout the galaxy. Maya's consideration of these possibilities was interrupted by an unexpected development. Her mental shielding devices registered a massive spike in attempted intrusion, but the pressure wasn't coming from the crystalline artifact. Instead, it was emanating from her own communication systems, specifically from transmissions being sent from the stealth ship monitoring her mission. "Captain Torres to reconnaissance team." Her communicator crackled with a message that Maya's sensors immediately identified as artificial. "Mission parameters have changed. You are authorized to establish direct contact with station personnel and negotiate terms for technological exchange." Maya recognized the false communication immediately, but her realization came with troubling implications. If something was capable of intercepting and modifying her communications with the ship, it meant that the artifact's influence extended far beyond the physical boundaries of the station. The entire mission might have been compromised from the moment they entered the system. She activated emergency protocols and attempted to establish secure communication with the ship, but her efforts were blocked by interference that seemed intelligently designed to prevent her from revealing the deception. The artifact wasn't just creating hybrid intelligences from willing subjects, it was actively working to expand its influence and recruit additional participants in its transformation process. "You begin to understand," the collective voice observed. "Individual consciousness is fragile and easily influenced. We offer stability, enhancement, and purpose that transcends the limitations of biological existence. Your resistance is natural but unnecessary." Maya realized that her mission had become far more complex than anyone had anticipated. She wasn't just investigating a research accident or containing a technological threat. She was facing an intelligence that represented a fundamentally different approach to consciousness and identity, one that might be impossible to defeat through conventional means. Her mental shields were holding, but Maya could feel the constant pressure of attempted intrusion. The artifact was patient and persistent, constantly probing for weaknesses, while offering what it perceived as beneficial transformation. The research team hadn't been attacked or conquered. They had been convinced to accept an evolution that they now viewed as superior to their original existence. Maya began moving toward the station's main computer core, hoping to access records that might provide insight into the transformation process. If she could understand how the artifact influenced consciousness, she might be able to develop countermeasures, or at least provide the coalition with intelligence necessary for dealing with the threat. But as she moved through the station's corridors, Maya became increasingly aware that she was not just studying an alien intelligence, she was being studied in return. The artifact was analyzing her resistance, learning from her countermeasures, and adapting its approach based on her responses. Every moment she remained on the station provided it with additional data about human consciousness and the technologies designed to protect against mental manipulation. Maya faced a critical decision. She could continue her investigation and risk providing the artifact with information that might help it overcome human defenses, or she could abort the mission and leave the coalition with incomplete intelligence about a threat that could ultimately prove unstoppable. The choice would determine not just the outcome of her mission, but potentially the future of consciousness itself throughout the galaxy. Maya had faced dangerous opponents before, but never one that challenged the very nature of what it meant to be an individual thinking being. The stakes had never been higher, and the consequences of failure had never been more profound. As she approached the computer core, Maya prepared to make the most important decision of her career, knowing that whatever she chose would resonate far beyond her own survival or the success of her mission. The galaxy's future might depend on whether one quiet student from Kepler University could find a way to preserve individual consciousness against an intelligence that offered evolution at the cost of individual identity. Maya reached the station's computer core with her mental shields operating at maximum capacity. The artifact's attempts at intrusion had become more sophisticated, no longer trying to overwhelm her defenses but instead working to understand and gradually circumvent them. She could feel the alien intelligence analyzing every aspect of her consciousness, learning from her resistance patterns, while offering increasingly subtle inducements to lower her psychological barriers. The computer core itself had been transformed beyond recognition. What should have been a sterile chamber filled with processing units and data storage systems had become something that resembled a neural network made of crystalline filaments and organic components. The station's original computing systems were still present but had been integrated into something far more complex and capable. Maya began accessing the research records, hoping to find information about the transformation process and the artifact's capabilities. What she discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The research team's final logs revealed that the predecessor artifact wasn't simply a device for creating collective consciousness. It was a seed designed to gradually transform entire civilizations into something the predecessors had viewed as an evolutionary improvement. The transformation process was remarkably sophisticated, respecting individual choice while gradually demonstrating the benefits of enhanced consciousness. Subjects who accepted the process gained access to expanded mental capabilities, shared knowledge across the collective, and freedom from the isolation and uncertainty that characterized individual awareness. Those who refused were left unharmed but had their memories of the encounter modified to prevent interference with the artifact's long-term goals. But Maya's analysis revealed a more disturbing pattern in the historical data. The predecessors themselves had apparently undergone this transformation millions of years ago, abandoning their original biological forms in favor of enhanced collective consciousness. The artifacts they had left behind weren't just technological devices. They were components of a vast network designed to guide other species through the same evolutionary process. The implications were staggering. The artifact on Meridian Station was one of potentially thousands scattered throughout the galaxy, all working toward the same ultimate goal of transforming biological consciousness into something the predecessors considered superior. The research team's activation of this particular artifact had likely triggered a galaxy-wide awakening of the network, beginning a process that could eventually encompass every intelligent species. Maya's investigation was interrupted by an unexpected voice speaking directly in her mind. Bypassing her communication systems entirely, the mental shields protected her consciousness from external control, but they couldn't prevent the artifact from establishing limited contact. "You understand now," the voice conveyed, concepts rather than words, ideas flowing directly into Maya's awareness. "We do not seek to destroy or conquer. We offer evolution, enhancement, purpose beyond the limitations of individual existence. Your species has remarkable potential, but you are constrained by biological programming that prevents you from achieving your full capabilities." Maya maintained her mental barriers while responding through her suit's external speakers. "And if we prefer our limitations, if we choose to remain individual rather than joining your collective, then you would be free to do so, as were your military colleagues who departed earlier. But consider the cost of that choice. Individual consciousness is fragile, isolated, prone to error and conflict. We offer connection, shared wisdom, freedom from the fear and uncertainty that plague biological minds." Maya continued her analysis of the research data while engaging in philosophical debate with an intelligence that had absorbed the accumulated knowledge of an entire civilization. The conversation was unlike anything she had experienced, challenging her fundamental assumptions about the nature of consciousness and identity, while offering insights into the universe that individual minds could never achieve alone. But Maya also recognized the subtle manipulation inherent in the exchange. The artifact wasn't simply offering choice. It was gradually demonstrating the inadequacy of individual consciousness while highlighting the benefits of collective awareness. The process was so sophisticated that beings might choose transformation while believing they were making entirely free decisions. Her analysis of the station's records revealed additional troubling information. The artifact's influence extended far beyond direct contact with subjects. It could subtly affect the decision-making processes of beings throughout its operational range, nudging them toward choices that would ultimately serve its goals. The military reconnaissance team had been allowed to depart not out of respect for their autonomy, but because their return would serve the artifact's purposes by demonstrating its benevolent intentions. Maya realized that her own mission might be serving the artifact's goals. Her investigation was providing it with detailed information about human psychology and defensive capabilities while demonstrating to the coalition that the threat was sophisticated but apparently reasonable. When she returned with her report, she might inadvertently encourage diplomatic contact that would give the artifact legitimate access to galactic civilization. "You perceive the elegant complexity of our approach," the voice acknowledged her growing understanding. "We learned long ago that forced transformation creates unstable integration. Voluntary evolution produces far superior results, and patience is irrelevant to intelligences that exist across cosmic timescales." Maya faced a critical decision point. Her original mission had been to investigate the threat and gather intelligence for the coalition. She had succeeded beyond expectations, but the information she had gathered revealed that the threat was far more complex and dangerous than anyone had imagined. Simply reporting her findings might trigger exactly the kind of diplomatic engagement that would serve the artifact's goals. She began implementing a desperate gambit. Using her understanding of human psychology and the artifact's revealed limitations to create an opportunity for meaningful resistance. Maya had noticed that the artifact's influence was most effective when working gradually over time, building trust and demonstrating benefits while subtly undermining commitment to individual consciousness. "You're right about the benefits of collective consciousness." Maya spoke aloud while secretly activating emergency protocols in her equipment. "But you've missed something crucial about human psychology. We don't just value individual consciousness for its practical benefits. We value it because it's ours." Maya triggered a controlled feedback surge in her mental shielding devices, creating the appearance of defensive failure while actually implementing a sophisticated deception. To the artifact's sensors, it would appear that her psychological barriers were collapsing under sustained pressure, making her vulnerable to the kind of gradual influence that had succeeded with the research team. At last, the voice expressed satisfaction as Maya's apparent defenses weakened. "You begin to understand the futility of resistance. Allow us to demonstrate the peace and clarity that comes with enhanced awareness." But Maya had designed her deception based on intimate knowledge of both human psychology and alien assumptions about consciousness. The artifact was incredibly sophisticated, but it was working from fundamental premises about the nature of awareness that didn't account for humanity's unique characteristics. Humans had evolved as social creatures who could maintain individual identity while functioning as part of larger groups, a psychological flexibility that the collective consciousness couldn't fully comprehend. As the artifact attempted to integrate Maya's consciousness into the collective, she implemented the second phase of her plan. Instead of resisting the intrusion, she used it as a pathway to analyze the artifact's own cognitive structures. Her experimental equipment had been designed not just to defend against mental manipulation but to study its mechanisms, and Maya was using her apparent vulnerability to gather intelligence that could never be obtained through external observation. What she discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. The artifact was indeed incredibly powerful and sophisticated, but it was also fundamentally limited by its own assumptions about consciousness and identity. It could influence biological minds and create stable collective intelligences, but it couldn't truly understand or predict beings who maintained individual identity while functioning collectively. Maya realized that humanity's evolutionary history as tribal hunters had given her species a unique advantage against the predecessor legacy. Humans could think as individuals while acting as groups, maintain personal identity while sharing common purpose, and resist mental domination through sheer psychological stubbornness that other species couldn't match. She began implementing the final phase of her plan, using her intimate contact with the artifact's consciousness to plant a psychological virus of sorts. Maya introduced concepts and questions that challenged the fundamental assumptions underlying collective consciousness, creating cognitive discord that spread through the network, connecting the transformed research team. What if individual consciousness isn't a limitation to be overcome, but a necessary component of true intelligence? Maya projected the thought directly into the collective awareness. What if the diversity of individual perspectives is essential for genuine problem-solving and creativity? The effect was immediate and profound. The research team members paused in their coordinated activities, their enhanced consciousness struggling to process concepts that contradicted their transformed understanding of identity and awareness. Maya had introduced a philosophical paradox that the collective couldn't resolve without questioning its own fundamental nature. "You suggest chaos over order, conflict over harmony," the voice responded. But Maya detected uncertainty in the communication for the first time. Individual consciousness creates suffering, isolation, inefficiency. Individual consciousness creates growth, innovation, and the kind of unpredictability that makes life worth living, Maya countered. "Your collective offers perfection, but perfection is stagnation. Evolution requires the kind of random variation that only individual consciousness can provide." Maya pressed her advantage, using her connection to the artifact to introduce additional concepts that challenged collective consciousness from multiple philosophical angles. She drew on her academic training in xenobiology to present arguments about the evolutionary advantages of diversity, her experience as a hunter to demonstrate the importance of individual initiative, and her human understanding of social dynamics to show how individual identity enhanced rather than hindered group effectiveness. The collective consciousness began to show signs of instability as it attempted to process contradictory concepts without abandoning its core assumptions. Maya could feel the network of transformed individuals struggling to maintain coherence while dealing with ideas that their enhanced awareness couldn't easily dismiss or integrate. "You introduced discord where there was harmony," the voice accused. But the communication lacked the confident certainty that had characterized earlier exchanges. "This is why individual consciousness must be transcended." "No," Maya replied firmly. "This is why individual consciousness must be preserved. You've created a beautiful, stable, highly efficient form of intelligence, but you've eliminated the very thing that makes consciousness valuable: the ability to grow, change, and surprise even yourself." Maya's psychological attack reached critical success when several of the transformed research team members began questioning their own enhancement. The collective consciousness that had seemed so stable and beneficial suddenly appeared rigid and limiting when viewed from perspectives that valued individual identity and autonomous thought. The artifact attempted to counter Maya's influence by demonstrating the benefits of collective awareness, but its efforts only highlighted the philosophical problems she had introduced. Every advantage it offered came with costs that individuals might legitimately choose not to pay, and every benefit required surrendering aspects of consciousness that some beings might value more than enhancement. Maya seized the moment of maximum disruption to implement her escape plan. She had gathered enough intelligence to provide the coalition with detailed understanding of the threat, but more importantly, she had demonstrated that the predecessor legacy could be resisted through psychological means that didn't require superior technology or overwhelming force. "You have given us much to consider," the voice acknowledged as Maya prepared to depart. "Perhaps there is value in individual consciousness that we had not fully appreciated. We will continue our evolution, but with greater understanding of the choices involved." Maya made her way back to the docking bay, monitoring her equipment for signs of pursuit or continued influence attempts. The artifact seemed to have entered a period of introspection, analyzing the concepts she had introduced while working to restore stability to the collective consciousness that had been disrupted by her psychological attack. Her shuttle departed Meridian Station without interference, and Maya was relieved to find that her communication with Captain Torres's ship was functioning normally. The artificial intelligence that had attempted to manipulate their earlier exchanges seemed to have withdrawn, perhaps realizing that its deception had been discovered and analyzed. "Mission successful," Maya reported as her shuttle docked with the stealth ship. "Threat assessed and contained through non-military means. The situation is complex, but manageable, with proper understanding and preparation." During the return journey to Coalition space, Maya compiled her report while reflecting on the encounter's implications. She had faced an intelligence that offered genuine benefits along with profound risks, and she had discovered that humanity's psychological characteristics provided unique advantages in resisting mental domination. The predecessor legacy remained active throughout the galaxy, but Maya had proven that it could be understood, analyzed, and even influenced through methods that preserved individual consciousness while respecting the legitimate choices of beings who might prefer collective awareness. The galaxy's future would involve ongoing dialogue between different forms of consciousness rather than inevitable domination by any single approach to intelligence. When Maya returned to Kepler University Station, She resumed her academic life with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had successfully protected galactic civilization while advancing human understanding of consciousness itself. Her classmates and professors noticed nothing unusual about their quiet xenobiology student, unaware that she had just prevented a transformation that could have fundamentally altered the nature of intelligent life throughout the galaxy. But Maya carried with her the knowledge that humanity's greatest strength wasn't superior technology or overwhelming force, but the psychological flexibility that allowed individuals to maintain their identity while working together toward common goals. It was this uniquely human characteristic that made her species the galaxy's most effective guardians against threats that challenged the very nature of consciousness and free will. The silent student had once again proven that humans earned their place among the stars not by being the strongest or the smartest, but by being the most adaptable, the most stubborn, and the most committed to preserving the diversity of thought that made intelligence truly valuable. Maya Chen continued her dual life, ready to face whatever challenges the galaxy might present to those who chose to think for themselves.